Last lecture, I should thank our host, my best friend, Rachel, for thank he and some of the more visible members of the movement for putting this together and making sure that everything goes well. Hans for his lecture earlier. Everybody's doing great. Thank you for showing up. It's a big deal for you to be here. The more attendance we have, the more powerful we are in our movement. And the internet viewers, those who are watching at home, all of you, thank you. All right, so I believe you'll find much of my presentation a lot that's familiar. In fact, one of the hallmarks of this approach is that it's intuitive to the point that when people are introduced to the resource-based economic model, they have what is one person called an of course mentality to it. Of course, this just makes sense. For those who identify with this direction, you know what this mentality is. What will seem new in my presentation is the language I offer to articulate what you already know. Since this is about a 10 to 15 minute lecture, the information will be highly streamlined and generalized. If you're here as a member of the Zeitgeist movement and are confident in your mastery of the movement's jargons like systems theory and dynamic equilibrium and the like, you'll find that this presentation will not be a reiteration of those concepts. And for the general audience, I invite you to take notes, but to ask yourself why the simplicity of this direction, why the simplicity and the self-evidence of this direction does not have the relevance in the society to be implied. And a more accurate title for this lecture would be Economic Components of a Resource-Based Economy. We call for a straightforward redesign of our culture in which the age-old inadequacies of war, poverty, hunger, debt, unnecessary human suffering are viewed as not only avoidable, but as totally unacceptable. Anything less simply results in a continuation of the same catalog of problems inherent in the present system. Jacques Fresco. A resource-based economy is an attempt to meet the needs of the human population through dynamic resource management in the most eco-sustainable way possible. A resource-based economy utilizes existing resources rather than commerce, and all goods and services are available without the use of credit, currency, barter, or any form of debt or servitude. The first economic component of this direction is simple: a servant. The jargon in this case would be resource accounting, but that's no different than when you go out and ask yourself, what do I need for the house? I need food, I need water, etc., and then you go to the supermarket. The resource-based economy's approach is, what do human beings need for survival? That's the same answer: food, water, etc. So we survey the planet and figure out where those resources are. A survey, a global survey. Once we have the raw data obtained from the survey, we rank the data from most optimal to least, using gradients such as pollution output, rates of renewability, anything that can be factored in to the degree of our usage and sustainability. Today, we only focus on the output potential of a resource for our usage of it. A resource-based economy recognizes the imperative of linking the environmental impact of a resource, of our usage of a resource, and then our decision-making to harness and utilize that resource. Resources that have the most negative retroactions would be given the least priority. And once that data is compiled, we'll rank the potential to the degree of usage and adjust accordingly. The second component would be to develop an automated system for distribution and monitoring. One of the most evident negative retroactions to globalization is its blindness to the cliche, the quickest way between 2 points is a straight line. Globalization has prevented the efficient distribution of resources in areas where raw materials exist. What's the next step for us would be, based on our technical ability, would be the localized distribution of raw materials. For example, Uganda, which has substantial natural resources, including fertile soils, regular rainfall, sizable mineral deposits of copper, cobalt, and gold, and other minerals, has been exploited so much that their agricultural yields are globalized, that they are, in terms of dollars and cents, a poor nation, not in natural resources, just in dollars and cents. The scarcity that exists in that nation as a result of their exploitation has gotten so bad that large resistance militias are attacking their own country and their own citizens. Recently, this has been brought to national attention with the spotlight on a single individual, brutal individual, while the reality is that his actions and the actions of many others in those regions and poverty-stricken areas could be cut off if there was a global response to the conditions that generate people like Joseph Kony. In a responsible economy, we localize the distribution of raw materials whenever possible. Resource monitoring would allow us to monitor and forecast the Earth's regenerative processes and track for the most optimal times to plant or retrieve a resource while maintaining dynamic equilibrium with the society at home. The idea is nothing new. Grocery chains, department stores, even the ink level indicator on your printer is an example of how this technology is used every day to track what's in storage to what's being used by consumers, and only now we're applying this to the world at home. So for a review, a global survey to find the locations of materials. During this global survey, we would rank the output potentials and distribution qualifiers using factors like strategic use, weighing negative retroactions like pollution against the potential usage of a resource. The technological harnessing, observing the current state of technology to utilize a resource, and proximity, whenever possible to harness a resource and utilize resources in the areas closest to where the raw materials were obtained. Next, we create an automated system for active resource monitoring, which reports the state of technology, the rate of usage, and any other relevant trend. In other words, we create a systems approach to locating and harnessing resources which is not subject to cultural relativism, a corporation's profit margin, or a country's military, but on natural law, which is the only law that exists in relation to how we exist on the planet. This approach is how we arrive at decisions rather than making them. So what was the Zeitgeist Movement systems approach? Our system approach is very simple. We can put it in one sentence. We survey, we find potential, we qualify for negative retroactions, apply modern technology to harness, distribute, and monitor in the most technologically advanced and holistic way possible. Fourth, we decide what needs to be produced. What do people need? Well, that can come down to two categories. You have the immutable necessities of life, such as food, air, and water. But you also have leisure goods, such as boating or golfing, whatever you find, or vanity items, for instance. In our culture, we find things like handbags and stuff like that, those types of things. Those are the things that we need. But all large-scale production would be subject to this systems approach, what I outlined earlier, the survey to the final piece of it. For agriculture, this would again mean that we do an arable land survey followed by a consumption survey to figure out how much land is available and compare that to how much food the population tends to consume. Of course, there are other factors for us to consider, but for the sake of time, I'm only focusing on the process. Now, despite the fact that we have everything tracked, there are some materials where renewability will always be slower than the consumption, and this is where the state of our technology comes in. With a growing population consuming water, we would need to make sources of water that are not currently usable. An earlier lecturer explained how desalination technology can create fresh drinking water from ocean sources. This is just another example of how we can substitute, use alternatives, and even create materials when necessary. The goal of a resource-based economy is global abundance for the entire human population. Once this holistic process of extraction and production is in motion, private property as a defining structure in our society would be by default ruled out. Instead, a system of access would be developed. Again, for time, only the process will be defined, so as far as obtaining physical goods, the population would have centralized regional access in close proximity to where they are, and a person would simply come in, take an item, use it, and when finished, return it when it's no longer needed. The truth is that the necessities of life are only as scarce as we say they are, and when we decide to become intelligent in our production and preservation methods while taking full advantage of technology, there's no reason why we cannot provide for the world's population many times over. In closing, I'll leave you with a quote. A resource-based economy is nothing more than a set of proven life-supporting understandings where all decisions are made based on optimized human and environmental sustainability. It takes into account the empirical life ground, which every human being shares as a need, regardless again of their political or religious philosophy. There's no need for cultural relativism in this approach. It's not a matter of opinion. Human needs are human needs, and having access to the necessities of life, such as clean air, nutritious water, nutritious food, clean water, along with a positive, reinforcing, and stable, nurturing, non-violent environment is demanded for our mental and physical health, our evolutionary fitness, and hence the species survival itself. Peter Joseph. Thank you.